This is part 2 of this chapter.
Now, sometimes women fighters have the perception that they will be more respected if they use the same violent graphic language that men use.
Yeah.
So
Because it's being one of the guys.
do you feel
They're modeling, right? They're modeling the behavior in the words.
you feel
Right.
a pressure then to out macho the
Mhm.
macho bullshit
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
dog
Right.
talk.
Mhm.
And that's something where we lady knights do and can and must set the good example. And when we are not on the field, it sets a good example. And I see it many times for the gentlemen to treat us like ladies until we put the helms on and go on the field. And the other lady fighters need to see that. I always love it when I'm at a chivalry meeting and say in another kingdom, and one of the guys slips and uses one curse word, and then he looks at me and says, "Oh, excuse me, pardon my French." And I think,
It's really helpful if you can rattle off some French obscenities there. It's like, it's not
Fern.
French.
And I just want to say that you embodied the example you're talking about at your elevation ceremony at Penzic, because you were put on vigil, you're going to be knighted there, and you showed up in court in a very
Gorgeous dress.
very complimentary cotehardy that left no doubt as to your gender, and yet you presented yourself as a lady and walked like a knight. And so
I'll let you know, I actually saw your knighting. Well, I was living in Trimaris at the time, and it was a very long time ago, and you were the first female knight I ever saw. And I saw that knighting, I was like, oh!
it is my goal in life. It is my quest to go through a whole year in the SCA and not have somebody during that year say to me, "Gosh, you're the first lady knight I've seen in my experience in the SCA." This is my quest, that everyone else will have seen a lady knight before they've seen me.
I'm
Someday.
personally thrilled that I can go to large events like Penzic or Estrella or Great Western and see female knights I don't know.
Right.
And
It's
to me, that is amazing, because that's only been here for the last handful of years or less, where I can look at a female fighter and not know her or know that I've
Right.
Beth, you shared with us a graph of
Kelvin made it, yeah.
percentage of women elevated, and it's been a steady. There was a peak, and I'm looking at the graph now. There was a peak there was nothing before a certain year, and then there was a peak in the mid 80s, and then it dropped off, and then since like the mid 2000s, it's been a pretty steady rise in percentage. It's still low, but
I'd actually like to speak to that graph just a little bit. You'll notice that peak in the mid 80s, and that was Fern. That was you.
That was me.
Okay. In part, that was because Fern's knighting was so public and so there at one of the largest event that we held.
Yeah, that's right.
She, by her very existence, granted permission to the other kingdoms to knight their up-and-coming solid women as well. Okay, she, by living, gave permission for others to excel. So I will point that particular peak, Fern, that one's on you.
And I'm going to talk for a second, because you know you're my hero. You know you're my, it's no secret. So I authorized in 87, and Fern, you got knighted in 86, I believe. And Fern knows this story. It's something I don't keep secret. I went to Penzic, and I'd been fighting, and I had heard that there were lady knights. It didn't occur to me that there was a lady knight. So why couldn't there be a lady knight? There was one. And I saw Fern standing up in court, and you were wearing red and white lance neck, and you were really so beautiful and so powerful looking, and you were guarding. And to this day, I can see you in my mind's eye, and you were my hero for years and years. You still are, and just having you there, as Toby says, it didn't occur to me that women couldn't be knights.
That was a peak. That was a peak year. There's no doubt about that. That was
right. So there's the permission, and here's us fangirling on Fern. Okay, in part because we're pointing out that women look at other women as examples. Right. The more female knights there are, the more examples there are, the more people can go, oh, I can do that too, which is something we talked about earlier. So one of the things that we'll notice, and I do disagree with something that one of your questions had earlier that said that there was 30% of the fighters on the field were female.
Yeah.
That might be true in the rapier.
Yeah, not on our field.
Not on the heavy field.
No, so, I think that I don't want to interrupt you, but I think what she said was 30% of people at her practices that she goes to.
That's good.
Okay.
That was an anecdotal percentage. Okay.
So in a more a wider variety, I would say that in the rapier field, you might get 25 to 30% female fighters, and in part because the entry is a little bit easier. It's a little more conducive to the way she moves and fights. Speed is more prized. Speed and agility is more prized over strength. So lots of things that are far more welcoming on the fencing field. However, in the heavy field, she's only at about 6 to 7%, somewhere in there, of female fighters on the heavy field. Interestingly enough, that holds true historically. So when I was writing the book, one of the things we came across was an Italian payroll for one of the Crusades. And I didn't have, the translation. It took me a long time to get the translation. But when they did translate it, they found that only about 7% of the names on the fields for the commanders were female. So even then, we're looking at somewhere between 5 and 7% are female heavy war-type fighters. So we're getting that in the society. And I think the chart that they shared with you is showing that we're starting to push close to the 6 to 7% of the people who are knighted are female. So we're getting close to that percentage. And it's taken a steady rise over the years, because in the beginning we didn't have that. We had far fewer. 7% female might have been on the field, and only 3% were knighted. But now, as we start approaching our actual per capita percentage, I think we're starting to get there.
I'll tell you another numbers story. I've moved to 3 different baronies in my career, and I was knighted before I moved. So every time the Lady Knight, moves into a new barony, the number of women at fighting practice goes from 0 to 0 or 1 to 10 to 20% of the fighters.
Yes.
So what this says to me is that 10 to 20% of those 10 to 20% of the women are thinking about fighting. They'd like to try it. I'm not saying they stay. I'm not saying they become knights, but they don't even try it out if they have to be the first one to do it. But if they're not the first one, okay, then 10 to 20% of the people at fighting practice are women who are trying it out to see if they like it.
Fern, can I ask you a question? You had Elena and I both fangirling over you, and it's no secret. And I get that. I am so uncomfortable with that. I'm like, I go, I'm just Bess. Like, I'm, I got noisy dogs. I go to work. I'm just an ordinary person. And yet, and especially because I won coronet, I have people telling me all the time, that, like I do with you, like you're my hero, and I look up to you, and you inspired me. I am so incredibly taken aback and uncomfortable by it. How does that feel for you?
The thing is, it's not about you. Your fan club. I saw this with other knights when I was a squire. People like to join a fan club. The fan club is not about you. The fan club is about them. It's their fan club. They like it. They put your name at the top of it, but it's their fan club. And you don't have to do anything whatever about the fan club. There's an Eliyahu fan club, and there's a dog fan club, and there's an Elena fan club. And it's their fan club, and your goal is to let them have their fun, let them enjoy their fan club, and try not to spoil their illusions about you.
Right.
And here's the thing, you just said there's a Eliyahu fan club and a dog fan club, and there's an Elena fan club. So at what point does it, like, I'm just a woman, right? So I look at it as maybe a gendered issue, but is that a gendered issue, or is that like a fan club issue? Is it a night issue? Sometimes
it's a night issue. Definitely, it's a night issue.
It's a night issue, but it's also not yours. And a peer, but it's also not yours.
It's not yours.
Fern hit the nail on the head. It's not yours. It's theirs. I had a gal come up to me with this little sachet bag and hand it to me, and she explained to me that it was the dirt on which I knelt when I was knighted.
Oh my God.
Right.
Whoa.
That she gave me. Okay, wow. She gave me a little sachet bag of the dirt and I knelt on when I was knighted. And we did some I was terribly flattered, brought me to tears. Wow, you thought so much of that. Thank you so much. And when we were done fighting a pickup fight, and she put her helmet in her helmet bag, she had an identical sachet in her bag.
Wow.
I was her inspiration. And so she had the dirt from which I was knighted in her armor bag to remind her that it was possible, that she too could be knighted. Sure. So the fan club isn't about you.
No.
The fan club is what you have given to others by breathing. Okay? It simply is.
I don't think I've got any fans like that.
Yeah, not you. You're just evil.
You knelt on concrete.
I have another question that, because we talked about beginning fighting, the impediments to beginning fighting, and what we and armor and training and examples. What about a woman who starts fighting but then finds they have responsibilities, family and childcare
and career
work, and picking up after somebody's mess, because too many guys.
Nobody does this alone.
Right.
Nobody does this alone.
Yeah, that I've read a lot about the shared burdens of like work around the house and that sort of thing, and how in couples who both work outside the home, well, or what used to be outside the home, typically the female partner will still do more of what's considered housework around the house, and that so the burdens are not shared equally. And if you look at maybe at a feast, who's picking up after stuff? If you look at one of the things that always pisses me off is when there's a chivalry meeting right at the end of the tournament or something, and who's left to pick up stuff and pack up stuff while the knights go off and meet? It's their significant others or their dependents and stuff, and that it sends a horrible message.
It does.
We're not responsible to clean up after ourselves. So there are women leave the workforce sometimes because of those kinds of other responsibilities. How can we, or what can we do to see that? We talked about helping women get started fighting, get on the field, get proper training. What about continuing? There are people fall off from fighting because it takes a real passion for it and focus and commitment to continue into knighthood and beyond, to continue learning and developing. But it does seem sometimes that women have more burdens in terms of continuing that commitment. So what can we do?
Well, as a friend of mine says, that's other people's relationships, and you don't put yourself. I can't, if I see say a husband and wife and a child, I can't say to the husband, it's not my relationship. I can't insert myself into them, but it might be okay, when the women are talking, as as you do afterwards when you're changing, to say things like, gosh, it would be, I see that you were doing all that. It must be hard. Maybe, make the suggestion sometimes you and your husband, if you're both fighters, say, could swap off the childcare, but that's another people's relationship thing. And I will support anybody in their relationship, but I can't insert myself in their relationships.
So for me, pointing it out, identifying a problem is 3/4 of the way towards fixing it. If you can't see a problem, you can't possibly fix it. And the first thing I think people need to recognize is that nobody gets knighted by themselves. It is, in my estimation, the most selfish of all of the peerages, because in order to become a knight, you must take from everybody else. Somebody else set up the list field, somebody else ran marshals, somebody else was the head herald, somebody did the list, somebody autocrated the event for you to fight at. Somebody else did all of these things in order to create a showcase for you to show your skills. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because there's also, somebody made lunch, somebody made sure you had enough water, somebody did all of these things. Now, often those are women's tasks and chores, okay? But if you're gonna be knighted, you've gotta have that support structure, and recognizing that you can't do it all yourself, and you've got to let somebody provide that support structure for you, is also vital. So it's a two-edged sword, pardon the metaphor. You've got to recognize that you need help, and you've got to allow people to give it to you.
I found a phrase that one Pensick that was very useful for partitioning things, and it vaguely sounds like military. So when I was in Atlantia, anything that sounded like military was a go. The phrase is, I won't be, yeah, they do. So the phrase is, no, I can't be fighting in the field battle because I have family duty that day.
Family duty.
Family duty. And if one day it's the guy who has family duty, and one day the husband, one day the wife, then the wife doing family duty means it's going to be the husband's turn to do family duty some other time.
So in the last couple of years before I was knighted, it was very important for me to be seen from one end of the kingdom to the other, which required a lot of traveling. Yeah. And it was a ridiculous amount of traveling. And that required my husband to look at it and go, okay, let's make that possible. Whether it was making sure my car was ready, or that I had a lunch packed, or that my armor was in great shape for me to be able to get to the event and fight. He didn't even always get to go to the event because there was family duty to do. Oftentimes he could come with me, and that was great, but not always, because nobody does this alone.
Right.
I was really lucky. My partner at the time, when I was, up and coming, and my group of friends, we were all hardcore SCA, hardcore fighters. And there was a group of us, and we just traveled everywhere together. And I was lucky to have that many, and it was a fun thing for us to do. But yeah, couldn't have done it. I know one year we were away, I counted 47 weekends out of the year. We were home for Christmas. Yeah. We were gone a lot.
But it's not always a significant other for the partner. Sometimes it's your friend group. Sometimes it's your best gal pal. Maybe it's your squad, whatever.
Your travel buddies. Yeah.
It's your travel buddies. Okay. But whatever it is, you have to recognize you're not doing it on your own. There has to be a support structure to it. And there are times when a career can't. I mean, and this happens for guys too. It's guys and girls both. The career that they are in for the next year or 6 months or 9 months or whatever is not going to let them fight. I have had to take breaks from my fighting because I was in a deployable status. That's not deplorable. Or I got shipped off to the other side of the world where you were more concerned with, being able to do your job day to day, and fighting is not even on the table. So yeah, sometimes you're going to have to take breaks, particularly if your path is a long one.
I think we need to say this more frequently to all of the knights. This is something that is less a gender issue than others. All the knights know that good luck, good fortune, good career, good health plays a significant role in getting knighted.
Oh, yeah.
And we maybe need to say that loudly and more frequently so that everybody knows we understand. We understand some things. Sometimes you have bad luck and we'll wait for you. The good thing is there's no term limits on this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Plenty of people get knighted when they're older than me.
Got a guy up here who was 60 who got knighted recently. So
There
it
you go.
happens.
Yep.
I fought 30 years before I was knighted.
Yeah, right.
We talk about that in chivalry meetings all the time, that
Mhm.
you have to make decisions in your life. If being a knight is not more important to you than your family, then you're probably making the right decision. Do the thing for your family, do the thing for your career. This isn't a negative for you that you can't be knighted right now. Make a good choice. But at the same time, the flip side of that is we don't knight you if you have a good excuse.
Right.
So I had a friend of mine who was one of the best fighters unbelted in the kingdom. And he's Duke now, but wasn't at the time. But really good fight. And he was the first one on the field, and he was the last one off the field. And after a major tournament, the knights would go off all in the corner, and he'd still be holding the field against all comers. And one day we're packing up after an event, and he comes to me and goes, "I don't get it. I don't know what I'm missing. Why don't they see me?" And I said, "Oh, they see you all right." It was like, "Well, what are they? What am I missing?" I said, "Well, got a question for you. When you're on the field, because I'm the first one there and the last one off," and he says, "and when you're doing that, who's setting up or taking down your camp? Your lady is. Your lady is muscling down that tent by herself and packing it into the car herself and putting everything away and getting you ready to leave the event while you're going to shuck your armor at the last second. And yeah, they see you."
Well,
And
honestly, that's a great thing for you to say. I don't give the knights as much credit as that.
in this particular case, it was accurate.
Okay,
But
all right.
but it was one of those things that I pointed out to him and says, yeah, they are seeing the whole person.
Yeah.
And knights, when they look at who's coming up as a knight, they look at how are you off the field as well. Do you actually stand up for people? Are you the person that we want to point at and say, be that person? Because that's what a knight is.
We have
Talk
high
about taking a break. Sorry,
Say
Fern,
again?
go ahead.
we have really high, we in the SCA have really high expectations for our knights,
We do.
both prowess and chivalry, everyday chivalry and courtesy and everything else. And your statement about getting knighted is the more selfish of the peerages. We kind of expect the knights to be more unselfish afterwards.
Exactly. They have to pay it back.
A lot of payback is expected from the knights, and I think that is correct. I think that is appropriate.
I just want to go back to, we were talking about people taking a break. One of the things that we'll say up here is that they're busy developing their mundane persona. And that's, and you know what? That's okay. And I think we do. It's so important. You can't do us to the extent of your family. You gotta balance it.
The other point is the thing that we started out to begin with, saying that women will take every blow at a greater impact. And this is one of them. I have to take a year off for a child, or I have to take, and it stops her because she says, taking a year off. Dude, the guy took a year off because he broke his shoulder. It's okay.
Right.
He didn't make that a stopping point. Right? He made that just another step along the road. And she'll see it as a reason to stop, because there's that little thing in the back of the head that says you shouldn't be here. And some of those things that we would excuse for any guy who took the same amount of time off, she doesn't give herself that grace.
See,
And that's one of the things she's got to.
is that really what it is? Because I'm not in the guy's head. I don't hear the conversations. When I had to have my shoulder reattached, you know, I tore a ligament like we all do eventually, and had to have it reattached, and, you know, 6 months of physiotherapy and 6 months off. I came back, and I was a knight. I was a viscountess at the time, but I was embarrassed because, man, I'd taken 6 months off. Like, I was like T-Rexing all over the place, you know. I couldn't really use my arm, and I nearly embarrassed myself off the field. So I don't know, because I know a lot of high caliber fighters who have gone through things, and I've asked them, you know, about injuries and coming back, and I don't know if that's a gendered thing or not. I don't know if guys just don't discuss that.
I think guys get it too. I know Steve does. If he's taking time off injury, he's going to go, man, I'm going to suck for the first half a dozen practices.
Yeah.
But again, I'm saying that women see that as a wall. Guys look at it as, molasses that I've got to get through. Okay.
And that could
slow them
be.
down.
And I came back, you know, I went, I'm going to suck it up. and
But you're also a knight.
Yeah. and maybe there is that difference. I don't know.
Well, that may be, in fact, the difference isn't so much gender, it's just the percentage of guys who have surgery and don't come back maybe is exactly the same.
Good.
You know, that
it frustrates me that we don't have good data on this. We don't, and people in the SCA are terrible about responding to surveys, trying to collect data, because obviously, you know, it's some sort of impending organizational mind control or something, but collecting good data in the SCA has been really difficult, if not impossible. So we don't really know about people coming back from injury. I have rehabbing a knee right now. I'm, you know, every night I know, anybody who's been fighting for any length of time and has persisted, virtue of fortitude, has come back from an injury, and the difference is viewing it as just another challenge on the road, or an opportunity, or the end. And I think encouraging anyone who has that kind of impediment, or a life situation impediment, injury, anything, to come back and to work on it and to be better, and to give themselves a break too, to go easy on themselves while they try to come back, and not try to try to work back into it in a reasonable way. That's something actually I've seen guys who, they're injured, they don't take the time off, they don't rehab it, they come back too hard, they injure it again, and they never, I don't see as many women who, with the persistence, who don't take the time they need to recover and follow proper physiotherapy, and so they can come back and continue. And there's a particular guy.
I'm a little suspicious about what medical advice these women are getting from their physicians. Are they getting advice from their physicians that says, don't do that, you'll hurt why are you hitting people with sticks? You'll hurt yourself if you do it again.
You'll give yourself breast cancer. Don't get hit in the boobs, you'll get breast cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they made that one up. I mean, women made that one up. I fought that one for years. But the guys, if the physician says that to a guy fighter, he doesn't listen. But it may be that the women are listening.
Our family doctor is in the SCA, but I have had a lot of doctors who, when I explain what fighting is, and the other martial arts and the other things and all that, they say, don't do that. Yeah, you should exercise.
We're not listening,
of course.
No, we're not listening.
You shouldn't actually exercise. You should exercise in some theoretical way, but not in a way that actually involves exercise.
Usualism.
So
we actually had to search for a family doctor that could look at our sport and go, meh, okay, I guess you're going to do that again, huh? And recognized that his goal was to get us to the state where we could participate in our chosen sport. I've had both knees replaced at this point with, full, complete prosthetic replacement. And the surgeon who stripped my skeleton from my meat suit and replaced parts before sewing me back together, I actually showed him what the fighting was and told him, look, this is what I intend to do when I'm recovered. And he's like, okay, let's get you there. Okay. But it takes a particular doctor to be able to look at it and go, okay, my job is to get to the point that you do the things you want to do.
Toby,
and that's rare.
Elina, I do have a suggestion for you, that you get one of your squires to accompany you, walk behind you whenever you make an entrance into a room, and they start a recorder, a playback, and it's the theme from the $6 Million Man.
They were doing that for a while. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
I will say my chiropractor and my physiotherapist know what I do. I've shown them videos of the field battle, and I brought my kid in. So they really and truly understand, especially when I was rehabbing my shoulder. So they knew exactly what I needed to do. And they know about it. My chiropractor may not be thrilled about it. My dentist knows because I cracked teeth because of it. He encourages me to stop, but I've got a good mouth guard now.
One of the things you're pointing out, sorry.
I used to carry a picture of me in armor after I had the experience with an ordinary general physician. He says, what about those bruises on your legs? And I gave him all the wrong answers. I said, those? Nothing, no big deal. And he said, well, where'd you get those bruises? And I said, one of my friends. And he said, how often does this happen to you? And I said, every week.
When I was
I had the exact same. I had the exact same conversation. I had the exact same conversation with a gynecologist who, seeing the bruises on the back of my leg at the end of the exam, says, okay, so here's the conversation. We need to talk. Every female fighter has had this conversation. We need to talk. You know that you don't need to take this kind of abuse. I said, no, you don't understand. It was my fault. No, I know that it was my fault. He says, I just didn't block it properly. He says, no, nobody should be hitting you without your permission. No, it wasn't. I gave the permission. Oh, no, you don't understand. It was my brother. And oh my God. I pointed out, I'll bring you the videotape. There's film! So, yeah, there's no right answer you can give.
I was grocery shopping in Tampa once, and I was wearing a sleeveless top, and I was bruised. I had like a really good bruise here, and oddly on my shield arm. I don't know why. And this lovely gentleman, my husband was back there, and he was a big burly guy at the time. And this lovely gentleman said, "That's it's quite a bad bruise you have on your arm. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do for you?" I went, and I didn't realize he was kind of giving me it out. And I went, "You think that's bad? Look at this one." And he was just
the other guy.
Yep. That exact phrase has gotten me out of a lot of. I was at Pennsylvania airport waiting for someone that we were taking a flight back from Menzik. And I'm sitting there waiting for him to come up the escalator and waiting. There maybe half an hour hanging out, and it's right in front of the information booth. And first there's one officer at the information booth, and then there's two officers, and then there's three officers, and finally the biggest, hairy, scariest officers that 6'5.5" with shoulders this wide saunters over to me because I'm wearing a tank top and I've got the bruise on one arm and snippet and bruises on the other, and he comes sauntering over, and I just look at, he's 5 feet away still, hasn't said a word, just said, "Officer, you should see the other guy." No problem. Off he goes. Yep. It happens.
Well, I think we've, as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think we can completely cover everything in this topic. I think we've talked about a lot of different things in various ways, answered or discussed a lot of the questions that were suggested. as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to hang out and just chat for a while.
Sure, I like talking fighting.
But
I like talking fighting.
but I do think as long as we've gone on here, maybe we should start to wrap it up and give us, if you want to give us some closing thoughts about the issue at large of women in the Order of Chivalry.
Well, let me try and narrow some of the answers down a little bit. So demographically, you think that there is a huge disparity between male and female knights, and it's getting better. I mean, percentage-wise, right?
Right.
Per capita.
The question
per
is,
capita
why aren't
fighter.
there more female knights? Are there the right number, do you feel, at this time, as it's getting better?
I would say that we are percentage-wise getting closer to per capita how many women walk on the field and fight seriously.
Okay.
So if you're looking at only 1% of fighters become knights, we're finding 1% of female fighters become knights, as well as the 1% of male fighters. We're approaching that. And
Okay.
part of that is we've had 10 plus years of examples to follow.
Yeah.
Solid, every kingdom has had a knight for almost every kingdom has had a female knight for a good 10 years. And so we're now growing into a per capita equal percentage. I don't think we're quite there, but we're getting real close.
Well, and if existing trends continue.
Right.
So you think as an organization, we are doing better? And are
Better than
doing
we were.
okay.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And
Right.
one
Could
reason
be
we know
difficult.
we're doing better, because of the number of women in the lower fighting orders. In the mid-realm, it's the Red Company. So there's plenty of women in the Red Company. I haven't calculated the numbers.
I
We
think
don't have that data.
it's possible that all of us who've been doing this for a long time can see the length of history going back to Fern's knighting or before Fern's authorization and even before that, and see that sweep of history and can see that it's getting better, but not there yet. But for a woman who's only been doing this for a few years or is just starting out,
Right.
it may not be as clear that there's been improvement.
Right.
That's
So in
right.
80 or 89, there was a group of guys who were at Penzik who literally went out of their way to hunt down female fighters and injure them.
Hurt them.
Not just get them a bruise,
To
injure
take
them,
out.
to take them out. Okay. That same group of guys broke my collarbone.
Yeah.
Okay. That group of guys, another gal in our kingdom was in the woods battle, was held up against a tree and piped in the ribs, broke 4 ribs. Another person had their forearm broken. But today we look at that with horror. Okay. At the
I
time,
think a lot of us would have looked on it with horror then if we knew about it.
Yeah.
well, at the time,
Oh,
the
of women
guy,
only.
that
That's the thing.
troop of 5 men had been hired by a crown. It was at least acceptable enough. Okay. And now we can look at that with horror. And I use that as that's the benchmark of what used to be. And it was
here-
post Fern's knighting. Okay.
And I will say, with that, the women all knew. We all passed.
Women all knew. We all told
ourselves.
each other instantly.
We all knew. Watch out for these guys. Be aware that this is going to happen. Be ready for it.
Yep.
You know, if something happens, or the potential is that something could happen. And I don't know why we didn't say anything to the guys. Maybe
Yeah.
I don't know why we didn't at the time. I don't know.
Some of us
why.
did. I know that my knight was livid beyond reason, and actually was part of the crew that went and hunted them down, identified them for the authorities, and so on. There were charges that followed these guys.
Oh,
Okay, there were, I believe that
Good.
the king himself was expelled. So there was a resolution to it, but it didn't come from the women.
No.
We didn't have the position to be able to fight back. These guys deliberately waited till the women were isolated. In my particular case, I was in a field battle and I was coming back from a line where I'd been fighting. I was by myself. So it's the same reason women don't report rape. You know, who's going to believe me? And a lot of women were initially not believed, but the internet had just started up and we had started sharing our stories, and there was too much similarity until we could see it for ourselves. So a lot of women looked at it and go, no one's going to believe me. They're going to say that I'm weak,
my
that I
arm
didn't
wasn't good
belong
enough.
there.
It's what we do. It's a sport.
It's
we all
guys
knew.
being guys. You must have misinterpreted it. No, we didn't.
We all knew. We all knew.
Wow. I'm
I
sitting
can
here
tell
getting angry, and it was 20 years ago.
Yes.
I can tell by both your faces you had no clue.
Yeah.
Once you were
No.
listening to it.
I only heard about it later as a rumor. What I heard was at one Penzic, there were a bunch of guys going around chasing the girls. They didn't come to find me. No. Bullies go. Bullies.
You're already a
look-
knight.
Right. Bullies look for the ones they can
The small and the
intimidate.
weak.
But it comes back to that thing that we discussed earlier. Once a woman is a successful fighter and has that under her belt, she carries herself like a fighter and is far less likely to be perceived as a victim of, you know, in a situation. It's why they didn't go looking for Fern.
Right.
So it really is one of those things. And yep, my male friends can be completely outraged about this. Oh my God, they're horrified. Okay.
I'm wondering if that was
This is the
Iceland's
uphill
war.
battle women were fighting.
I'm wondering if that was Iceland's war. And
That was 89?
No, that was a few.
89 or 90. It was 89 or 90.
Yeah, that was Iceland's war was a few years earlier.
well, that's why they didn't find me, because I was the head of the Queen's Guard, which kept accumulating all of the honorable squires from all of the kingdoms, and we had like a group of 100 people. They couldn't find me in the middle of that. I was Iceland's Queen's champion. That's why they couldn't find me.
And that's one of the things that concerns me now as a female knight, is that people say, you know, like, and I believe them, that they're saying that they're experiencing misogyny or being discouraged off the field.
Right.
Nobody discourages me, and I wouldn't let them. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't say anything to Sir Elizabeth that they might say to, you know,
That's true.
like Sarah the fighter. So
that's something.
What are we missing?
That's something that's true of knights in general. We always have to be aware whether somebody is behaving differently towards us than they behave towards other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I got a email from somebody it's on the border of Atlantia and Meridiate. And they said, hey, can you come to my practice? My squire, who is the marshal, the Knights Marshal of the local group, really needs to be pulled down a notch by a competent female fighter. For the first half of the practice, could you not wear your belt? Okay? And what they wanted me to show up was to fight this guy. They also wanted to get one of the gals authorized, who, as local Knight Marshal, he was not letting her authorize, and she was solid. I mean, she was absolutely solid. And I went out to fight, and the guy was, women can't fight. Sure. But I had the skill to undo that particular brand of misogyny. Most women don't. And unless they put up their hand and say, hey, I'm experiencing X, we can't see it anymore because they don't do it in front of us. Okay? Those 5 misbehaving guys at Penzic wouldn't have done it in front of you, Dog or Eli. They wouldn't have.
They wouldn't have.
Okay? They wouldn't have done it in front of Fern. But I was just starting out fighting, and yeah, I was prey. And it's a matter of, since I'm no longer in that position, I can't necessarily see it. So I have to rely on someone else's eyes. I have to.
But I think it's important to say that was a long time ago, and it's not like that now.
Right.
So we, the old people here, we can see the progression.
Right.
We can see, you know, so people now who say maybe there's not equality, or maybe there's some unpleasantness.
It's better.
And for them, there may well be. For us, it's so much better that we go, wow, this is fantastic.
Right.
So people
And that's what I'm
coming
getting
in,
at. That's what I'm getting at, is that
Yeah.
we can see a progression. There really were bad old days. There really were. And while it is not where I want it, while it is not yet equal, we're so much better than we were before.
There's something else that I'm going to put it out there and ask for your ladies' input on this. That we've asked female knights to join in this conversation partly because we have all been fighting for a long time. You have come to the place that many of our viewers' questions are coming from, but there's a difference between, I think, you and other female fighters, just as there are between knights and all other fighters. There's a different mindset that becoming a knight, not every man becomes a knight. Not every woman is going to become a knight.
Right.
And it's your attitudes and the things that you were able to overcome are part of what makes you knights.
Agreed.
And that's what all people, women, men, whoever, are going to have to understand, that there are things you have to overcome, things you have to give up, things you have to personally get past to get this thing, if that's the thing you want.
Right.
So I really appreciate hearing you guys say those things.
And there are differences, and many people don't recognize how subtle some of the differences are. I was talking to a lady after a class, and she's, well, gosh, I'd really like to be able to. And I said, how often do you look at your feet? Without looking down, tell me, what color are your shoes? Well, they're brown with a buckle on them. Says, I can't tell you. I honestly don't remember, and I haven't looked at my feet in hours. She says, but you spend most of your day looking at your feet with your head down and your posture like this. And she says, first thing you can consciously do, change your posture. That starts to build your confidence.
That's something I actually have talked to a lot of students in university about, particularly students who are about to go out into an interview situation or into a portfolio show or any other kind of situation where they're talking with people. I make sure that every student can shake my hand correctly, and men and women, and not trying to crush it like some of the guys do, and some women they've just never been shown. I say, you got to stand up, and I always teach them, ears aligned with shoulders, good posture, it's good working habit, but you also feel more you have to feel that confidence and look them between right here. Because if you try to look somebody in the eyes, your eyes are moving back and forth. You look shifty eyes. So right here, shake their hand, look them in the eye, remember their name. And these are things that we all know and we've done in our professional lives over the years. But it's true in the SCA too, that there's a certain, well, we talked about it before, not walking like a victim, that presence. Franchise, that presence of
it's presence attack.
Right. That is exactly those terms.
Yep.
I think you said it nicely. The path to knighthood is long and torturous, and many people can begin the path, but not everybody ends the path.
That's okay.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Being on the path, looking at the path, admiring the path, seeing the peak at the end of the path, that's noble and inspiring, even if you don't get all the way to the end of the path.
Of course, as we always say, knighthood may seem like the end of the path, but it's really the start.
Beginning.
Of another path.
Then there's the payback.
Yeah. And there's the payback phase. And that goes back into the vigil advice I wind up giving people is like, of Knight's Laurel and Pelican, the ones I can speak of being those, the Pelicans are elevated for what they do in the now, how they've affected our immediate now. The event they ran, did it run smoothly? Was there more, service rendered over chaos engendered? Was it smooth? We give them their elevation for how they impact our now. Laurels, there's some fortune telling going on. For them, it's how have you impacted our future? Who's going to be inspired by you? What's going to be built on what you researched? How did you further the art? What's going to happen going forward? But knights are the selfish ones because they took from everybody else in order to get to their to show their prowess. They took from the list mistress and the herald and the marshal and the autocrat, and they took from everybody else in order to perform on the stage. And the only thing that we're all evaluating as knights is, are you good enough to pay us back? Because if you are, we elevate you, and now it's time to pay us back.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Thank you, Stan.
True, though.
Excelsior.
Excelsior. That's right.
Excelsior.
I think we may have, unless anyone has some additional closing thoughts, because I said closing thoughts a while ago and we went on for quite a while.
We have gotten better.
So I think we've in one way or another answered a lot of the questions and that were proposed and talked about a lot of things. This may be a conversation that we need to revisit at some point, and look forward to doing so.
We may be, we've already talked about using this as a kind of a jumping off point to do something about persons of color in SCA fighting and the chivalry and so on.
And
So-
LGBTQ people in fighting and in the SCA. So I think this is it's an important subject. I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Cool.
So
Thanks for
one
inviting us.
last thing, if each of you had one sentence of advice to give to other female fighters who are coming up, what would it be?
Never give up.
Nevertheless, she persisted.
You belong here. Cut yourself some slack.
Okay, great.
So Bess, before you go, nevertheless, she persisted.
You don't.
I made a series of necklaces that have that in Morse code.
Oh,
yet
that's
So it
genius.
says, it's in Morse code, and yet she persisted. And I had the
love
great
it.
honor of actually giving one of them to Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, that's
Get
excellent.
out.
That's great.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Fantastic.
That's cool, Toby.
You're my hero now, Toby.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So, and we talk about in our previous episodes, we've talked about all the virtues, and we often come back to how they apply. And certainly, we've touched on prowess here and that, but fortitude seems to be one that you're all referring to here. So, persistence. Yep.
Persistence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Great.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
Thank you.
And until then, Jeff?
Hey, Doug,
yes.
Till then, be
your
thou.
attempt
Wait.
to make it under an hour failed miserably.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, I don't want to restrict it either. So
Yeah.
it was just a sort of a nebulous goal that I'm happy to fail at from time to time.
we may break this into, because of the length, may break it into two for posting, yet to be determined. So, with that said, until next time,
No.
be thou. Wait a minute. Let's try it again. Until next time, be thou
A good night.
Good night.
and true. Thank you.
There you go.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.